are going to move on to our update on the implementation of the Student Success Task Force. This is an important item, but I have asked Vice Chancellor Skinner and others to be brief in their comments, because I do want to reserve sufficient time that we can discuss our chancellor search. Some of the items on the task force we've gone over in terms of the legislation and what we in our most recent discussion. So, Eric, please take it.
Good afternoon, President Himmelstein, Chancellor Scott, members of the Board of Governors, and President Himmelstein, you're absolutely right. The board already today has dealt with many of the topics that are central to this item. This item is intended to provide a kind of a global picture of where we're at in terms of implementation of the Student Success Task Force recommendations, and it's intended to present to you as a package how we're moving forward with implementation. And that was central to the thinking of the task force, was that the recommendations really fit together and were really mutually interdependent. And so as a board, we definitely encourage you to continue to see the big picture as you move forward. So with we also wanted to sunshine the process so that you know about the working groups that we're engaged with and the various proposals that are moving forward. And lastly, to provide you with an opportunity to ask questions and provide input and direction. But in a nutshell, we've got 7 recommendations that we're actively working on at this point as part of the student success agenda. And today you've already heard about enrollment priorities at some length. You've also heard about the Senator Lowenthal's bill that contains both the Student Support Initiative, which has to do with counseling and advisement and helping students develop education plans. That Senator Lowenthal's bill also contains the changes to the Board of Governors fee waiver to institute academic progress requirements for Board of Governors fee waiver students in order to maintain eligibility. And then you've also heard about today about Senator Liu's bill, SB 1062, which would make some modifications to provide the community college system and the chancellor's office with greater autonomy. That had to do with the appointments of vice chancellors. So you've heard about most of this already. So this item is essentially about presenting it as a package, seeing if you have questions. If you've got time, we could spotlight a couple of the other proposals dealing with the Student Success Scorecard that Patrick Perry's been working very hard on, and as well as the other proposal we could go into greater depth on is having to do with the Common Core state standards, which Linda Michalowski has been engaged on that front.
Are those imminent, Eric?
No, I think they're not imminent. They're proposals that we are actively engaged in and working on. But if you wanted to, go ahead.
Perhaps if we could, Patrick, could you give us a couple minutes on the scorecard, just so we're up to date on that?
Sure. So we've the ARC Advisory Committee has been reconvened. We've added a number of members and a number of representatives from across the system. We've had one meeting, and our next meeting is scheduled for later this week. First meeting, we discussed the actual delivery format of the new ARC report, from very high-level aggregated reporting for certain audiences all the way down the continuum to very granular data provided back to the campuses so that they can look at this data in more greater depth. We talked about the scorecard being highly aggregated at a statewide level, but getting rid of the large PDF file that we currently put out there. We would go to a web-based format. Campuses could go in and look up their metrics. They could be highly aggregated. They could then expand out the metrics to show the various crosstabs of subpopulations and how they're also doing. The next meeting, we're going to talk about what we refer to as classic progression, looking at how to define degree-seeking cohorts, what are the high order outcomes that we're looking for them to get, degree, certificate, transfer, and also the intermediate measures of progress that we would also put into this progression. The ultimate goal here is for the new scorecard framework to be out by around October, and then actually have the scorecard available to the public on a normal ARC cycle, which would be March of 2013.
Member McDougall.
Yes, I'd like to certainly commend the staff and the Chancellor for the follow-up on the Student Success Task Force. I think it's appreciated by all of us, so thank you very much. The one question I had was in terms of the recommendation on the longitudinal student record. I noticed that that is not completed as one of the areas of attention. And some of the others that are not included are much more obvious to me why they are not included. However, that one has a history to it where it was almost implemented earlier except for being cut down. And it seems to offer a great deal of support and frankly credibility to K-12 community college collaboration. And it really helps to define that collaboration when you have a record that's going to follow those students as they enroll in college. So I know you've got a lot on your plate, but is there a particular reason why that one was not addressed?
You know, we easily could have put that on here, and so I think there's maybe there was a bit of a bias in terms of us assembling this matrix of focusing on things that had a very tangible, concrete vehicle that was moving. You know, and while there's a lot of work going on in this K-20 workforce, data system, this longitudinal system, and Patrick Perry's been quarterbacking that effort not only for our office but really for higher education in California across all the segments. That's a brewing conversation, but there isn't a specific, tangible vehicle that is as easy to track. But I think that's something we actually probably could add that as an eighth element. It's definitely something that we're working on, that Patrick's working on a weekly basis here. So it's
Chancellor
Could
Scott.
I add something here? It's my understanding, though, that we can't do that alone. We've got to have, and unfortunately, I recall back in the days of Governor Schwarzenegger, that was vetoed. And then our present governor has not shown as much enthusiasm for data as perhaps some of us would like for him to show. So the only problem, I mean, all of us are 100% behind it, but maybe Patrick and some of them could correct me, but my understanding is that the failure on that is a failure for total cooperation and funding from the state government. Can you add on that?
I mean, if I could, I would just add, I think you're right. It's something we don't have unilateral control over, but that's really the case with several of the other recommendations as well, such as the Common Core standards. I would actually suggest that we add it as an eighth item. It's something that a lot of the work has been going on behind the scenes, conversations with the State Board of Education, with the Governor's Office, with legislative leadership. So it's a little bit more behind the scenes, but I think there are ways we can spotlight it. And Patrick, do you want to add to that?
So we have actually been quietly trying to move on this, and Jack is right. It's not completely within our control because you have other segments who are, in this ballgame. Since the departure of CPAC, there's been a bit of a vacant spot as far as K-12 systems, and it's a delicate dance because we're not exactly sure what the governor and the governor's office true intentions are as far as K-12 data systems. So, coming out saying, okay, yeah, we're going to grab the reins on this is not something we can necessarily do openly. We have, however, been meeting monthly with CSU, UC, California Department of Ed, and EDD, who is the holder of wage records, in trying to lay the groundwork for creating what we call a federated K-12 wage system, whereas all the segments would essentially put up their own server in a virtual private type of network. And all those servers would be able to talk to each other. There would be no one segment that controls the entire domain of data, but everyone would share, control and access to other data for purposes that the segments have. We have a lot of need for data sharing, and we do data share amongst ourselves quite a bit. So We're trying to do this, in a quiet fashion and without any resources by distributing the burden across the segments right now.
Just a final comment, if I may. I'm just looking at it from the standpoint of effectiveness. And when students transition from the high school to the community college, when you actually have their record and you can see where they had successes and failures, the whole counseling process and its effectiveness and that ability to work through students is greatly enhanced. So I see it as being somewhat foundational to our capabilities to achieve student success. I know it's complex, but I do think it's worthy of trying to move on it as much as we can.
Vice President Baca, Member Storm, then Member Izumi.
Yeah, this discussion highlights the complexity that we're faced with on a number of these goals. Now, the task force laid out what are some general ideas that are some things that most of us at least can agree to. But as we said in closing that phase, the real work is in terms of the work that is being done by you, which is really good to see. We've got to be able to get it right, and we have to have expert input in terms of the evolution of these towards the goal. But I certainly, as we all do, recognize the complexity of it, but it doesn't mean that we can't do it. It just means we got to work harder, and we got to make sure that we get expert input into to reaching that.
Member Storm.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for all the work that you guys are doing with the implementation work groups. I'm taking a look at the schedules and I see that Student Senate is on every work group except for Common Assessment. Is that an oversight, or is there a reason why the Student Senate was left out of Common Assessment?
Sure, I'll answer. So that work group has actually yet to be reconvened, and there's no reason why they can't be on it. We just haven't reconvened it yet. The original assessment work group was primarily matric and
Great.
faculty.
Okay,
So, yeah.
well, we would love to have 2 seats on
Okay.
that work group. Thank you.
Okay.
Member Izumi.
I too would like to compliment you on the implementation process. I know that's the heavy lifting now, and so I think that this is a great schedule. I just want to follow up on what Member McDougall said about the longitudinal data collection, and also kind of following up on what Executive Vice Chancellor Skinner said about it could easily have been a part. I do think that it's probably, from my viewpoint, is, and despite I know that we do need the cooperation of other segments, that it would be helpful, I think, in terms of showing how important it is to our system that we have something like this. And I realize that I need to do it on a subtle, more quiet way. But I do think that there is room for spotlighting this and emphasizing the importance of something like this. And so, I would feel comfortable if we added it to the list of priorities.
Member Malumet.
My question is there a place where we can go to look at who all these people are? Partly because I'm interested in which students are, as a member of the Student Affairs Committee, so I want to know exactly which ones are involved. And just for me, because we get to meet people in all different walks of life, just have a sense of who's involved. Is it on the website? Is it somewhere we can see?
It's on the website in this form, which is just the membership. I guess we'd have to just give that some thought about the putting individual names out there, and just think through whether or not we're intruding on anybody's privacy. I'll tell you, my first reaction is, these are people serving in a public function. I don't think there's a problem with that.
Right.
But
I
if
don't
you
need
just
their
give-
email address. I just am interested in who they are.
And obviously sharing with the board is one thing. It's another thing about putting it up on the website. That's, but we could definitely make that information available to you, and perhaps it's smart to put it out to the general public as well. Again, these people are serving in a public function. It's not a secret, so.
Right. Well, I know I'd be interested, so if you have the committee names, I'd be interested. Thank you.
If I may just,
Please.
say a word about this newsletter that I had distributed to you. On the other end of the collaboration with K-12 Spectrum, we are well underway with implementation around the new Common Core State Standards and the Smarter Balanced Assessment that goes along with those standards. This newsletter is put out by the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium. I and some of the other higher education representatives on that group have actually been advocating for them to help us to explain what is going on in the very complicated world of implementing the Common Core State Standards and developing the assessment. So I would turn your attention to the last couple of pages. I think you can read this at your leisure, but this kind of puts in a nutshell the status of our work with Smarter Balanced and with the State Department of Education and with UCIT and CSU as well.
Great.
In this arena.
Thank you. Pardon me? Oh, we have a, go ahead.
We have a member of the public wishing to address the board. Kevin Feliciano of the Student Senate.
Good afternoon, members of the board. Thank you, Member Storm, for bringing up the Student Senate's absence in the assessment committee. I just wanted to bring up, you're going to have a change in leadership with the Student Senate in about 7 weeks. So there's going to be what we like to call a dead time in terms of student representation, where the only student representatives that are really, kind of in a formal function at that point are the members on the Board of Governors. And so as implementation moves forward, especially in the summer months where there's a lot more time that's able to be committed by both faculty, staff, administrators, and students, I'd like to ask the Chancellor's Office and the board if, between kind of the last week or two in June and right up until the July Board of Governors meeting, if they're if we could either kind of slow it down or wait, because there's no guarantee on who the students are going to be. I obviously don't know who my successor is going to be, and I don't know what students are going to be placed on these various committees and what kind of catch-up we'll have to play. And the students have been really pushing the board and the Chancellor's Office this year that implementation is where, we want our voice to be heard and where we'd like to affect what we do and do not like about the recommendations. So I'd ask that the board and the Chancellor's Office give every reasonable consideration to the upcoming change of leadership in the Student Senate, that you have not just students filling seats on these committees, but students who are able to contribute to the issues that you're discussing. So I ask the board to keep that under consideration as we move forward. Thank you.
Okay, other board member comments? Seeing none, thank you.